were investigating Benghazi, or what happened in Benghazi, and there was an author of an email 3 months to the day, 3 months to the day from when our 4 fellow Americans were killed. The author of the email says anti-American demonstration, looking for Americans to attack, game changer, soft target, no continuity, the cost to continue to do business there may become challenging. Would you want to talk to the author of that email if you were investigating Benghazi?
The Accountability Review Board had full run of the State Department to talk to anyone they chose to talk to. It's my understanding they conducted more than 100 interviews, and they were well aware, as their report reflects, of the dangerous situation in Libya.
I don't want to interrupt you. That actually was not my question. My question is, would you want to talk to that person? Not whether or not the ARB did, because the ARB actually did talk to that person. My question is, wouldn't you want to talk to that person if you were investigating Benghazi? Well, I promise it is not a trick question. The answer is yes. You would want to talk to the person who authored that email.
And as you just said, Mr. Chairman, the ARB did.
Yes, and the co-chair of the ARB called your chief of staff and told the author of that email not to go to Congress. That's my point. My point is the ARB did some good things. That's why our first 2 hearings were on making sure the recommendations by the ARB were actually implemented. But when the author of that email is going to be brought before Congress and one of the co-chairs calls your chief of staff and says, I don't think that that witness is going to be a good witness, Madam Secretary, with all due respect, she's a fact witness, whether she's good or bad. The author of that email has a right for Congress to question them. I mean, that's not even a close question. So somebody can be a good person, and I have no doubt that Mr. Mullen and Mr. Pickering both are. But this is also what I don't doubt. I don't doubt that that phone call was made to Ms. Mills saying, don't send Charlene Lamb before Congress. She's not going to make a good witness. And I don't doubt that there's not a transcript from any of the ARB interviews. And you may say, well, why does that matter? If you're going to write a report, and you want to write a report with specificity and particularity, you have to cite the transcript. And I can't tell you a single question that was asked of a single ARB witness because there is no transcript. So my point is not that the ARB did a bad job or a good job. My point is from a standpoint of a serious investigation, it was an inadequate job. And I want to hopefully prove that to you. There used to be a stack up there when Mr. Smith was with us about all the previous investigations that Congress and the ARB had done. Did any of those previous congressional investigations or the ARB have access to your emails?
Mr. Chairman, first of all, the witness you were referring to did appear before Congress.
That was not my point. But
your implication was that that witness was stopped from going to Congress.
No,
in fact, that did not happen, Mr. Chairman.
No, she definitely came.
Yes.
No, that's not my implication. My implication is the co-chair of what you call an independent accountability review board was calling someone he was supposed to be investigating to say, please don't send that witness to Congress. They're not going to show up well. That's my point. My point is, how can you consider that to be? I mean,
well,
have you ever heard of a judge calling the DA or the defense attorney and say, don't call that witness?
I really don't care what you all say about me. It doesn't bother me a bit. I do care a lot about what you're implying about Admiral Mullen, and I will not sit here and hear that.
Well,
Admiral Mullen served this country with great distinction. He served the State Department with great distinction in being the co-chair of the Accountability Review Board. And I think his work speaks for itself.
Well,
and I'm sorry that the important work that was done by that board is held in such low regard by some members of this committee, and I deeply regret it.
Are you doubting that he placed the phone call? Is that the purpose?
I know nothing about the phone call.
Well, I do, because he testified before another congressional committee. He admits it was a mistake, Madam Secretary. I don't know why you can't.
Well,
he admits it was a mistake to call and say, don't send a fact witness before a congressional committee.
Well, I think that
That doesn't mean he's a bad person. It just means that when you hold up the ARB as independent and your chief of staff picked most of the folks on it, Patrick Kennedy had a role in picking some of the folks on the ARB, despite the fact that some people think Patrick Kennedy may have also been involved in approving or not approving. If you need to read a note from your lawyer, you're welcome to, Madam Secretary.
No, it's just hard to sit here listening to the comments you're making about someone that I consider to be a great American. If he said he made a mistake, that's even more proof of what a fine gentleman he is and what a great public servant he's been. It doesn't in any way, what you're saying, impugn his service for 40 years and certainly not his service on the Accountability Review Board. I can't help it, Mr. Chairman, that you all don't like the findings of the Accountability Review
Ma'am,
Board.
we had
I can't
two
help
hearings.
it that you don't like the findings of
we
all
had
the
two
other
hearings.
congressional committees.
We had two hearings where we did nothing but discuss the implementation of the ARB findings, Madam Secretary. So with all due respect, we've had more hearings about the ARB findings than we have with you. So don't tell me that we don't care about the ARB. We had two hearings. My point is this: the ARB nor the previous congressional investigations had access to your emails, did they?
I don't know what they had access to. I know that during the time I was at the State Department, there was certainly a great effort to respond to your predecessor, Congressman Iss's inquiries, and many thousands of pages of information was conveyed to the Congress. And I know that the State Department has worked diligently and persistently to try to respond to the many requests that it has received. And I think that given the pressure and stress of business they've been under, they have performed as well as they could. So you will be getting, and in fact the entire world will be getting, all of my emails, because they're all going to be public, and you will be able to read them along with everybody else.
Madam Secretary, that actually was not my question. My question was whether or not the previous congressional committees and ARB had access to your emails. That was my question.
90 to 95% of my work-related emails were in the state system. If they wanted to see them, they would certainly have been able to do so.
You know what? That is maybe the 10th time you have cited that figure today.
It is.
And I have not heard anyone other than you ever cite that figure. Who told you that 90 to 95% of your emails were in the State Department system? Who told you that?
We learned that from the State Department and their analysis of the emails that were already on the system. We were trying to help them close some gaps that they had.
Can you provide me with a name? Because when I asked the State Department about 10 days ago, what's the source of that figure, they shrugged their shoulders.
Well, you can look for the state.gov addresses, and they certainly pop up. And
right, and the Inspector General report, Madam Secretary, the Inspector General report, which you can't argue by perfect analogy, but you can certainly extrapolate. The Inspector General report found that less than 1% of State Department emails, record emails, were captured. So they give a number of less than 1%, and you give a number of 90%.
Well, I don't know what you're referring to. I can only speak about my emails, my work-related emails.
Well, let's talk about your work-related emails. We asked for them last year, and the State Department gave us 8. If they had 90% of yours, why did we only get 8?
Well, I don't know initially what you asked for, but I know that they tried to be responsive. 90 to 95% of them were on state.gov. I understand that the committee broadened the scope of their requests, and I think that in response, the State Department has been trying to provide what you have requested. In the meantime, they're going through the process of making all of my emails public.
You think our first request, there were only 8 emails responsive to our first request?
I can't speak to it. I believe your first request was for Benghazi, and I believe that the State Department did a diligent search. Then I believe you expanded it to Libya and weapons and maybe a few other terms, and I believe they conducted
our jurisdiction hasn't grown, Madam Secretary. Our jurisdiction is the same thing it was. Let me ask you this. You say that you turned over everything. I don't get a chance to watch you a lot on television, but when I see you are interviewed, you make a point of saying, I turned over everything.
All my work-related emails.
How do you know that?
I know that because there was an exhaustive search done under the supervision of my attorneys, and that is exactly the outcome. We turned over every work-related email. In fact, as somebody referred to earlier, we turned over too many. In the State Department and the National Archives said there were 1,246 out of the 30,000 plus that they've already determined did not need to be turned over.
And you have a really good group of attorneys, which makes me wonder how they missed 15 of them.
Well, if you're talking about Mr. Blumenthal, which I assume you are, he had some that I didn't have, and I had some that he didn't have, and I was under no obligation to make any of his emails available unless I decided they were work-related. And the ones that I decided that were work-related, I forwarded to the state.gov accounts of the people with whom I worked.
Madam Secretary, is there any question that the 15 that James Cole turned over to us were work-related? There was no ambiguity about that. They were work-related.
They were from a personal friend, not any official government, not any government official, and I determined on the basis of looking at them what I thought was work-related and what wasn't, and some I didn't even have time to read, Mr. Chairman.
So, are you telling me the 15? Are you telling me that the 15? I will tell the gentle lady from California that I'm going to take a little bit extra time, just like everybody else has, and we can either do it this round, or we can do it next round.
May I make a simple inquiry about how many more minutes the chairman plans?
The fewer the interruptions, the quicker I can get done. I'll put it to you that way.
Okay.
How's that?
I'm just
The 15,
mindful of the time.
my question to you on the 15 is, did your lawyers find them and decide that they weren't work-related, or did they not find them?
Well, I don't know why he had emails I didn't, and I don't know why apparently I had emails he didn't. And all I can tell you is that I turned over every work-related email in my possession.
All right, I'm gonna make two more observations, and then we're gonna call it a night. The first observation that I would make is that when you speak to the public, you say, I turned over everything. That's, for the most part, a direct quote. When you talk to the public, you say, I turned over everything. When you talk to the court, you say, while I do not know what information may be responsive for purposes of this lawsuit, I have directed that all my emails on clintonemail.com in my custody that were or potentially were federal records be provided to the Department of State, and on information and belief that was done. Why the different explanation depending on who you're talking to?
Well, one is a shorthand, Mr. Chairman.
Well, why not just tell the court I turned over everything?
Well, you know how lawyers are. They use more words perhaps than they need.
Trust me, I know that, and they charge you for every one of them.
Yeah, I'm well aware of that, Mr. Chairman, and the clock is ticking.
Well, one more, and I'll pay Mr. Kendall's fee for the last question.
Oh, I don't
How's
think you
that?
want to do that, Mr. Chairman.
I probably can't do it. You see my point, though. You're very definitive when you're talking to the American people that you turned over everything.
That's right.
But there are those kind of lawyerly fudge words when you're talking to court on information and belief.
Well,
And the reality is, even tonight, you cannot tell us that you turned over everything because you didn't think you missed the 15.
well, I didn't have them. I turned over everything I had. Everything I had has
Which
been turned
means the
over
system
to the
you
State
had
Department.
somehow missed those 15.
Well,
Last question on your system. Mr. Cummings said that your email arrangement was inappropriate. I think the president may have said it was a mistake. You have said that it was a mistake. My question to you, Madam Secretary, is was it a mistake for the 4 years that you had that email arrangement? Was it a mistake for the almost 2 years that you kept the public record to yourself, or has it manifest itself as a mistake in just the last 6 months?
well, since I believed that all of my work-related emails to .gov accounts were being captured and preserved, it wasn't until I was asked to help the State Department to fill in what they saw as some record-keeping gaps, not just with me, but with others, I did the best I could during those 4 years and thought that everything that I was emailing that was work-related was being preserved.
If you can find a source for the 90 to 95%, I would be grateful for it, and we would probably have fewer questions. If there is a source that you can provide that 90 to 95% were on the State Department system, then I'll know that I need to ask the State Department what took them so long. Because I'm just telling you, Madam Secretary, I got 8 emails the first time I asked, and now I've got over 1,500. So there's some disconnect there.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think that is a fair question. And I'm not at the State Department any longer, but I do want to defend them. They are under the most extraordinary pressure to answer congressional inquiries. I saw a figure recently that FOIA requests have jumped something like 300%. They don't have the resources. They don't have the personnel. They take their responsibility of reading every single line, and as Ranking Member Cummings reminded us, having to redact personal information, personnel information, obviously they take it very seriously. I think they're doing the best they can, and I know that they've tried to be responsive to you and to the many other requests that have come their way.
Well, Madam Secretary, on behalf.
Mr. Chairman, you just gave a long answer, Madam Secretary, to Ms. Sanchez about what you heard that night, what you're doing, but nowhere in there did you mention a video. You didn't mention a video because there was never a video-inspired protest in Benghazi. There was in Cairo, but not in Benghazi. Victoria Nuland, your spokesperson at the State Department, hours after the attack said this: Benghazi has been attacked by militants. In Cairo, police have removed demonstrators. Benghazi, you got weapons and explosions. Cairo, you got spray paint and rocks. 1 hour before the attack in Benghazi, Chris Stevens walks the diplomat to the front gate. The ambassador didn't report a demonstration. He didn't report it because it never happened. An eyewitness in the command center that night on the ground said no protest, no demonstration. 2 intelligence reports that day. No protest, no demonstration. The attack starts at 3:42 Eastern Time, ends at approximately 11:40 p.m. that night. At 4:06, an ops alert goes out across the State Department. It says this: mission under attack, armed men, shots fired, explosions heard. No mention of a video, no mention of a protest, no mention of a demonstration. But the best evidence is Greg Hicks, the number 2 guy in Libya, the guy who worked side by side with Ambassador Stevens. He was asked if there had been a protest, would the ambassador have reported it? Mr. Hicks' response? Absolutely. For there to have been a demonstration on Chris Stevens' front door and him not to have reported it is unbelievable, Mr. Hicks said. He said, secondly, if it had been reported, he would have been out the back door within minutes, and there was a back gate. Everything points to a terrorist attack. We just heard from Mr. Pompeo about the long history of terrorist incidents, terrorist violence in the country, and yet 5 days later, Susan Rice goes on 5 TV shows, and she says this: Benghazi was a spontaneous reaction as a consequence of a video. A statement we all know is false. But don't take my word for it. Here's what others have said. Rice was off the reservation on 5 networks, White House worried about the politics. Republicans didn't make those statements. They were made by the people who work for you in the Near Eastern Affairs Bureau, the actual experts on Libya in the State Department. So, if there's no evidence for a video-inspired protest, then where'd the false narrative start? It started with you, Madam Secretary. At 10:08, on the night of the attack, you released this statement. Some have sought to justify the vicious behavior as a response to inflammatory material posted on the internet. At 10:08, with no evidence, at 10:08, before the attack is over, at 10:08, When Tyrone Woods and Glenn Doherty are still on the roof of the annex fighting for their lives, the official statement of the State Department blames a video. Why?
During the day on September 11th, as you did mention, Congressman, there was a very large protest against our embassy in Cairo. Protesters breached the walls. They tore down the American flag. And it was of grave concern to us because the inflammatory video had been shown on Egyptian television, which has a broader reach than just inside Egypt. And if you look at what I said, I referred to the video that night in a very specific way. I said, some have sought to justify the attack because of the video. I used those words deliberately, not to ascribe a motive to every attacker, but as a warning to those across the region that there was no justification for further attacks. And in fact, during the course of that week, we had many attacks that were all about the video. We had people breaching the walls of our embassies in Tunis and Khartoum. We had people, thankfully not Americans, dying at protests, but that's what was going on, Congressman.
Secretary Clinton, I appreciate most of those attacks were after the attack on the facility in Benghazi. You mentioned Cairo. It was interesting what else Ms. Newland said that day. She said, if pressed by the press, if there's a connection between Cairo and Benghazi, she said this, there's no connection between the two. So here's what troubles me. Your experts knew the truth. Your spokesperson knew the truth. Greg Hicks knew the truth. But what troubles me more is I think you knew the truth. I want to show you a few things here. You're looking at an email you sent to your family. Here's what you said. At 11 o'clock that night, approximately 1 hour after you told the American people it was a video, you say to your family, 2 officers were killed today in Benghazi by an Al-Qaeda-like group. You tell the American people one thing, you tell your family an entirely different story. Also, on the night of the attack, you had a call with the president of Libya. Here's what you said to him. Ansar al-Sharia is claiming responsibility. It's interesting, Mr. Katala, one of the guys arrested and charged, actually belonged to that group. And finally, and most significantly, the next day, within 24 hours, you had a conversation with the Egyptian Prime Minister. You told him this: we know the attack in Libya had nothing to do with the film. It was a planned attack, not a protest. Let me read that one more time. We know, not we think, not it might be, we know the attack in Libya had nothing to do with the film. It was a planned attack, not a protest. State Department experts knew the truth. You knew the truth, but that's not what the American people got. And again, the American people want to know why. Why didn't you tell the American people exactly what you told the Egyptian Prime Minister?
Well, I think if you look at the statement that I made, I clearly said that it was an attack, and I also said that there were some who tried to justify it on the basis of the video, Congressman. And I think
but real quick, calling it an attack is like saying the sky's blue. Of course, it was an attack.
Well,
we want to know the truth. The statement you sent out was a statement on Benghazi, and you say vicious behavior as a response to inflammatory material on the internet. If that's not pointing as the motive of being a video, I don't know what is. And that's certainly how the American people saw it.
Well, Congressman, there was a lot of conflicting information that we were trying to make sense of. The situation was very fluid. It was fast moving. There was also a claim of responsibility by Ansar al-Sharia. And when I talked to the Egyptian Prime Minister, I said that this was a claim of responsibility by Ansar al-Sharia, by a group that was affiliated, or at least wanted to be affiliated with Al-Qaeda. Sometime after that, the next day, early the next morning after that, on the 12th or 13th, they retracted their claim of responsibility.
Secretary?
And I think if you look at what all of us were trying to do, and we were in a position, Congressman, of trying to make sense of a lot of incoming information and watch the way the intelligence community tried to make sense of it.
Madam Secretary.
So all I
There
can
was
say
not
is
conflicting.
nobody.
There was not conflicting information the day of the attack because your press secretary said, if pressed, there's no connection between Cairo and Benghazi. It was clear. You're the ones who muddied it up, not the information.
Well, there's no connection.
Here's what I think's going on. Here's what I think's going on. Let me show you one more slide. Again, this is from Victoria Nuland, your press person. She says to Jake Sullivan, Philippe Reines, subject line reads this: Romney's statement on Libya. Email says this is what Ben was talking about. I assume Ben is the now somewhat famous Ben Rhodes, author of the Talking Points memo. This email's at 10:35, 27 minutes after your 10:08 statement. 27 minutes after you've told everyone it's a video, while Americans are still fighting because the attack's still going on, your top people are talking politics. Seems to me that night you had three options, Secretary. You could tell the truth, like you did with your family, like you did with the Libyan president, like you did with the Egyptian prime minister. Tell them it was a terrorist attack. You could say, you know what, we're not quite sure. Don't really know for sure. I don't think the evidence is there. I think it's all in the first one, but you could have done that. But you picked a third option. You picked the video narrative. You picked the one with no evidence, and you did it because Libya was supposed to be, as Mr. Roskin pointed out, this great success story for the Obama White House and the Clinton State Department. And a key campaign theme that year was GM's alive, bin Laden's dead, Al-Qaeda's on the run. And now you have a terrorist attack. And it's a terrorist attack in Libya. And it's just 56 days before an election. You can live with a protest about a video. That won't hurt you. But a terrorist attack will. So you can't be square with the American people. Tell your family it's a terrorist attack, but not the American people. You can tell the president of Libya it's a terrorist attack, but not the American people. And you can tell the Egyptian prime minister it's a terrorist attack, but you can't tell your own people the truth. Madam Secretary, Americans can live with the fact that good people sometimes give their lives for this country. They don't like it. They mourn for those families. They pray for those families. But they can live with it. But what they can't take, what they can't live with, is when their government's not square with them. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.